me at cello, cello. You had me at cello. You had me at cello. Oh, you had me at cello. Well, hello, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday again. And you know that means another time for another episode of Cello Chat. Super thrilled this week to have with me Bryan Charles Wilson. Bryan, how are things?
Going good. I'm living in Vietnam, so it's nighttime actually here for me, but it's going well. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, I'm really looking forward to this. Now, I always like to start with just kind of like the story of how you got started on the cello in the first place, and then your educational journey that got you to your career. You have a short video on YouTube about your start with the cello, which I also want to refer people to because I think that's also super inspirational, that people can think, oh, I don't know if I can ever get there. But, you know, a lot of people who have really developed an incredibly successful career in music did not necessarily have it just like an easy or straightforward road.
No, I mean, for me, I appreciate you saying that. For me, the way I found the cello was at the end of third grade in our school system, they would let you try 3 instruments. So they would take all the kids, because in fourth grade you could start playing an instrument. So they take you to the cafeteria and all the music teachers would be there. And you could try 3 instruments, that's it. So you would go, at that time, this is what they would do. You could try 3 instruments you wanted, and they would grade you immediately. Say whether it was good, fair, or not recommended. That's the first time you're touching the instrument. So I tried drums because I thought that might be fun. My rhythm has always kind of sucked. So it gave me a fair, which was better than it should be. Then I went to the guy who had the violins, and I didn't even know what a cello was at that point. I just knew I didn't want to play the violin. Everybody played the violin. It was so high and whiny and annoying. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be like everybody else, which is a thread throughout my entire career. So I would say, give me that thing, whatever. And I did it, and he gave me a good. But the instrument I really wanted to play was the saxophone, because my grandfather, who's still around, he was a sax player. He was like kind of semi-professional. He owned a menswear store. He would do gigs, you know, on the weekends and whatnot. So he was kind of my musical inspiration. Nobody in my family played music, my immediate family. So I always saw him playing jazz and, you know, whatnot. And so I really wanted to be like that. And the kid right before me blew into the instrument, and it's this beautiful sound. And I remember the guy wrote down, you know, good, you know, you're playing. He said that, you're playing. And then I blew into it, and it sounded like a moose getting smushed in like one of those tractors or something, and it was just horrible. And the guy, he looked at me and he was like, not recommended. And I just remember being crushed as a kid, just like, oh, I'm 9. I'm never going to be like my grandpa. I'm never going to be a musician like him. Never going to be like him. Anyway, I went home and I told my mom, you know, today we tried musical instruments. And my mom this is not actually how she sounds, but in my mind, this is how she sounds because she's a Jewish mother. She was like, oh, that's wonderful. Musical instruments. You should play a musical instrument because it'll help you, prevent you from getting Alzheimer's when you're older. And I was like, I'm 9. What kind of motivation is that? What? I'm not incontinent. I mean, why are you getting, anyway. So she was excited about it. So I decided to try the cello. And I went to the teacher who had given me the cello there. And he was not a cellist, he was a violinist. And he immediately was like, this is a match made in heaven. You got to go to a real cello teacher. So he pawned me off my first cello teacher. Now to circle back, I still play gigs with that guy. Actually, he's my accountant now, because he taught for 30 years in school, and then he was like, I think I had enough of this. But anyway,
Wow.
years later, when I was in high school, he told me, I was like, so Mr. Marino, or I call him Larry, and I said, why did you give me a good that one time when I tried out the cello? He was like, oh, I give everybody a good. I just want people to come into the program. And I was like, oh man, my whole life is a lie. You're kidding me, right? Everything I just did. So that's the story. Yeah.
Good for him.
Good for him. Yeah, it worked. It worked. We still play together. Yeah.
All
And he
right,
just did my taxes.
I like that story. So, and then how then did that lead to, let's see, your first degree was New Jersey University.
No, I went to California Institute of the Arts,
Okay.
actually. That was my undergrad. During high school, for me, music was like my voice, really, because I still hate to talk like about my emotions or how I'm feeling. I hate it. Like it makes me so uncomfortable. But when I play the cello, I can do it without saying anything, right? I can play my emotions, which I desperately needed as a kid because I had like OCD and anxiety. I'm Jewish. I mean, everything's built into being Jewish. Come on. Depression, So the cello was perfect for me. So, but growing up, I knew that like I was not going to be, a star soloist classical player. I just knew I didn't have the talent to do that. I was not. It's not like I was bad. I'm not bad, but I was not going to be that that guy. So I was like, I got to figure out. I also kind of didn't really like the way that classical music was. I liked classical music, but I didn't like the institution of it so much. I felt like it was very often closed-minded and like very insular, like, and I just felt like I wanted to do something different. So I started to explore like improvisation. I started writing my own stuff. Again, I went to Manus School of Music, like the Saturday program. I really didn't fit in there that well. Like I ended up kind of almost getting in a fight with one of my chamber music teachers. Because I don't know, I just felt kind of constricted. But it did help me to start me writing music for myself. And I learned how to start improvising, and I studied jazz and stuff, even though I didn't really like jazz so much. I still don't really, not a big jazz fan, but I like the structure of it to learn how to improvise. To me, jazz, like, I try to force myself to like it, but the problem is, whenever I play jazz, it sounds like someone's imitation of someone playing jazz because I have no like real passion for it. But that being said, the methodology behind learning how to improvise over chord changes and stuff, very helpful for anything else that you want to do. So anyway, that being said, I went to California Institute of the Arts because I wanted to be able to go to a place where I didn't necessarily have to play in an orchestra. I wasn't really a big fan of playing in an orchestra. I wanted to be able to do my own thing. And it definitely allowed me to do that. But it also had, I fought against the other side of it, which at Cal Arts, they really loved experimental music, which I had never really been exposed to so much, or maybe a tiny bit. But to me, I still loved melodies. I still loved harmony. I still loved things that actually sounded good. And the stuff that they listened to sounded like, people being tossed into a wood chipper, for 45 minutes straight. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was needlessly complicated. So crazy, unbelievably crazy complicated, the scores you would look at. But for the end result sounding like this. And I'm like, why did you take all the time to write all this down? I could have improvised that my second day of cello. It sounds terrible. Like, what's the point of this? But that being said, the school did let me do my own thing, kind of create my own path. And by the end of it, I did like a half stand-up comedy, half music show where I graduated.
I can
Nothing
see
wrong
that.
with answer.
That's
Yeah.
wow. All right.
Yeah.
And then back to the East Coast.
Yeah. I went back to my hometown. I joined a subway band. I was in that for many years. And I played in the subways of New York City, which was crazy. I did that for many years. We also toured around and stuff. And then after that, years later, I got my master's degree at New Jersey City University, where my final thesis was a one-man show, essentially, where I sang some comedy songs. Where I'm surprised that they actually gave me a degree for that, but hey, they did. I have a master's degree.
Part of what I really like about this series of interviewing different cellists is how it shows the incredible variety of paths that people take.
Yeah.
Whatever the Shakespeare quote about there, more in heaven and earth than in your philosophy, and you seem to have embraced that.
Yeah, for me, I just had to kind of always do my own thing, I guess, because I knew that, again, like I said, I'd never be the greatest cello player that ever lived. That's not going to happen. But if I write my own stuff and I improvise my own things, no one can recreate that. That is solely me, right? So I felt like that's my way of speaking. So that's kind of what I tried to do.
But then what's interesting is, so that is solely you, and yet you have a very useful set of as a resource videos on how to do what you do, and so I think that that's interesting in that you clearly you think also like a teacher. Like if you had stumbled across somebody when you were young who walked you through these things, and maybe you did to a degree, you found a way to learn how to make it your own. And then 3 books as well, right? I think you and I are the only
We're the
people.
cello chords people, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And that's so useful. It's not just for guitar anymore. There's a lot of times that we're needing to chordally on the cello, and then the books on jams as well. So would you like to talk a little bit about kind of how these pedagogical projects came about?
Well, the first one I published right after I graduated college. It was a book that, to be honest, I was trying to accompany, I had my own band in college, like, in class, and I wanted to expand my repertoire. Oh, actually, no, this is really where it came from. My friend Barry Kornhauser, who I met, he's still my friend. He's a great cellist, but he learned cello. He's really a guitarist and bass player. So he had this very eclectic way of learning the cello. And he would show me, oh, I have this, look at this. I can do a C chord like this, and then also like this. And it was just so odd and weird. I met him at the New Directions Cello Festival. And I was like, oh, wow, I never thought of doing that. So, of course, I was lazy. I was like, I just typed into Google, like, cello chord book. And I couldn't believe that nothing showed up. So I was a lifeguard that summer. And thankfully, no one drowned. But I spent a lot of the time just writing down, thinking in my head, like, how many different ways I can write a C chord, like that. So I did that during college, and I published that after college, just because I thought it would be like why not? I mean, it's a resource. Like, people need that to. Some of the chords are, to be honest, 95% of the time I'm using the most basic version of a chord, right? If I'm just reading a lead sheet or something.
Right.
But there's nothing to say that you can't use anything a little bit more unconventional. And people have like really liked that. And then years later, I I was inspired by my grandpa again, because he used to go and do a lot of gigs using like Jamie Aebersold books.
Yeah.
You know, those aren't like, so he would play, he had his own kind of backing tracks that he would play. And of course, it was mostly jazz, sometimes, you know, some like Motown or some things like that. But he had his own band, you know, with the backing track, and he would just go play at nursing homes or wherever. And I thought that was really cool, because it's like, yeah, it's music minus one. You can play by yourself. And but again, I was not a big jazz guy. So I was like, well, what happens if I took that idea and I turn it into playing contemporary styles that you don't normally play on the cello or violin or viola or whatever, you know, like EDM or hip hop or uh, an Indian style piece, you know, something like that, where it has a backing track and the music's already written out for you, except for one part, which has an improvisation part. But in that part, I kind of give you the cheat sheet, which Jamie Aebersold would also do. Like, here's the scale you could use. Here are the notes in the chord. And then at the beginning of the book, I kind of have a, you know, an introduction of like how you could go about using it to practice. And also in the book, there's like, it has all these backing tracks, but it has a looping section of just the improvisation section. So you can just jam over that instead of having to play the whole thing over and over and just jam on that one little section. So I thought it would be a fun thing for, I mean, that's, I don't know. I thought like if I was a kid, it would be a fun resource to have, you know,
Yeah.
if I'm looking to kind of go beyond classical.
Yeah.
Again, nothing to say that's wrong with classical music. I love the music itself, but yeah, I just thought it would be a cool resource.
I couldn't agree more. Well, and then some of your videos really stand out too, as one tries to just kind of sift through all the staggering amounts of stuff that is available online. The ones that are not only outside the box, but that fill a need tend to jump out at me, of course. And I like, for example, you have a video on voice leading, you know, on thinking about just moving to the nearest chord, either note in the next chord that you were planning to go to anyway, or a chord that kind of makes sense to your ear, and then okay, well then choose a harmony that goes with that. And you know, again, I don't find that many others videos like that. And then the one that stands out the most really is the improvising based on your emotions, which is great, because and maybe that's part of what you didn't like most about the kind of the institution of classical music, where it often seems to be learn these notes on the page,
Yeah.
and now try to add some emotion to it. And you know, it's like after
Yeah, for me, like getting emotionally into the music was always easy for me, because again, it was kind of like my voice. But when you go about improvising based on emotions, like it was actually something that my uh, teacher in grad school, Dave Eggar, I don't know if you know who he is.
yes.
I mean, is insanely good cellist. And he was talking to me about how a lot of the studio work they, you know, it's or film work, they'll give you an emotion, they'll give you a word, right? I need this to be tragic, right? But what does tragic mean to you? What does tragic mean to the director? I need this to be feel like whatever. And then using that to try to catalyze something that comes out of your instrument. And I also made it funny too, you know, because I like just messing around. But like, there is something very powerful about that, because when you're working with a director or somebody who's not a really musician, they're not going to be able to tell you, well, it needs to be more Ponticello because and you know, and make sure you go from forte to, you know, they don't speak like that. No one speaks like that, and sometimes it's even harder to get we have so much technique and stuff that we've learned over the years that it's almost harder to get to the actual emotion of what you're doing by thinking like that. If you just think like, you know, there's a dead skunk on the street. It's like, okay, that could be half funny or half sad or whatever. It's like just using that image or whatever to get you into the song rather than thinking, all right, this needs to go from, you know, martelé bowing to détaché, and then all, you know, it's very, yeah, I don't know. You get what I'm saying.
Yes. Wow. Wow. Interesting. All right. Now your adapting of world music into your playing as well. A lot of that is Vietnamese music, and is because or immediately as a result of a Vietnamese marrying someone from Vietnam. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
All right.
absolutely. Yeah, my wife is Vietnamese, and it's not like I sought out Vietnam. I honestly didn't know anything about Vietnam other than, you know, what we learn about in school from about the Vietnam War, right? That's about it. Like I asked her one time when we were dating, I was like, "Does Vietnam have ice cream?" And she almost like punched me in the face. Like, she's like, "You're a complete idiot."
But
So I had no real reference. They do have ice cream.
but then the degree to which, I mean, just again, some of the videos out there of you just putting yourself out and saying, okay, I do know how to play cello, and I know how to imagine something and get it out of the cello. And you plug yourself into various settings with Vietnamese music and find a way to kind of just join it with your cello playing. And then also the cello playing and dance aspect
Yeah.
as well. I mean,
Well,
yeah.
my wife is a dance movement therapist. That's actually how we met. So she was studying in America, and we had a mutual friend, and I was doing like a music and dance piece with her, and she was saying, you know, I have this other friend that would be perfect for this. So that's actually how we met. We were kind of combining dance and movement. And oftentimes, you know, I work with my wife where she leads these workshops. And let me give you a caveat. I hate to dance. I don't even like to move. I want to sit down. All these cellists, they want to stand up. Like my teacher Dave Eggar, he's always standing up. He's bent over. I'm like, doesn't that hurt your back? Don't you want to sit down? Don't you want to relax? You got into this to relax and sit down, didn't you? Come on. So I like to be sitting, but that being said, she gets people to move, and I respond to their movement with my cello playing and being able to improvise and just kind of look at their movement and do that, which is very freeing and fun because, you know, there's no way to really be wrong about it, right? But you kind of take a movement. Is it pointillistic? Is it like waving? How do I translate that into the cello? Do I want to match the same movement as make it the same kind of sound on the cello, or should it be the opposite? Yeah. But when it comes to playing with different musicians, I mean, my whole life I had been kind of trying to jump into scenarios where cello really wasn't necessarily, you know, called for. But people are often surprised that even here when I do interviews, they're like, how did you think about combining the cello with these instruments? I'm like, to me, it's not that big a stretch because, I mean, they're most of the time it's like they're playing in C major, you know, right? Or like something very similar. Like we're all on the same tuning system. It's just sound. So the thing that you have to get over is just being afraid that like what you're gonna do is wrong. First of all, there is no wrong because there's no cello that exists in these things anyway. So that's kind of that's something we were talking about before, is like a lot of people are, you know, when you become so good at playing an instrument, when you learn in the classical method, right? You've spent so many years perfecting this craft, and you don't want to sound bad again. you don't want to go back to sounding like, you're playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, that all those years ago. And that's kind of where people get caught up because they don't want to try to improvise, even if they feel like they want to. They feel like, man, I'm going to suck at this. I'm going to suck. And maybe you will suck at the beginning, but maybe you'll also find you'd be surprised, like how much you already know, how much from just playing music all these years, how much you have amassed in that sense that even if you don't have notes in front of you, you still have all those years of music inside of you. So it's just it's being able to be afraid and not be afraid of what comes out.
Right.
That's what I find a lot of the time when, people want to improvise, but they're too scared to sound bad again. At the beginning, that's why I try to introduce it to kids at the beginning. It's kind of hard sometimes because they don't have a lot of foundation on the instrument. But even just the idea of like, take these notes and make up your own melody with it.
Yeah.
It's freeing enough that if you can build that with the technique as they go on, then it doesn't seem so scary later on.
Right.
When you're thrown into a situation where you need to do that or you want to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Right. And you start with drones, just as,
Yeah.
it's just.
Yeah, I love drones, man. Drones, everything meditate, like that is so, it puts you in the zone. I'm not like a necessarily really spiritual person, but that's kind of how I connect with whatever else is out there is through the music. But yeah, drones is a really good way to begin because there's no like rhythmic element to it.
Right.
You just have a set of notes and this drone underneath you. So there's no really way to sound bad. I mean, how do you, if you can play a scale, you can do it.
Right. The drone zone.
The drone zone. Exactly.
All right. So just one of the running themes of this series, because I mean, just to ask you broadly about motivating students, I think again, like a number of other guests, you just like, I think it's very inspiring what you do and how you do it. But there are still some times that we have a student that they're not yet in the habit of practicing getting out that cello and playing, and they know they want to, they want to practice more and they want to advance at a faster rate. Do you have some go-tos for how to motivate students to get to playing more and practicing more?
That's something that I sometimes struggle with too. Just because for me, I felt like I was always the one motivating myself. So it didn't really come from an external source. So growing up, it was me who wanted to do it, So I didn't have that much experience with that. But what I try to do with my students is I try to find something that they're interested in, if they're interested in playing music for movies or whatever, or if they're interested in writing their own songs or whatever, I try to hone in on that. Like, I mean, I want them to be good on the instrument too, but like if I can find something that they're passionate about, then it makes it a little bit easier for them to want to do these things rather than feeling like. That being said, there is, you got to know your scales, you got to play your etudes and stuff like that. But if I can at least focus on an element what they are really passionate about or more passionate about, then it generally helps.
Yeah. All right. Great. So projects coming down the pike, performances coming up in the rest of 2024.
I'm doing some collaborations with some more Vietnamese artists. There's one artist, Quang, who takes traditional Vietnamese folk songs and arranges them for, a traditional Vietnamese ensemble somewhat, but he doesn't do it he takes the essence of the songs, but also adds an improvisation and stuff like that. And I sat in with him, so I'll be performing with him. One thing that I've really been proud of is working with a group called Dandal, which is run by a instrument maker and a flautist, and he plays so many things. His name's Whitcomb. He plays the Jew's harp. Anyway, what they do is they take a lot of traditional, almost like ethnic instruments, because there's a lot of ethnic minorities in Vietnam, almost like Native Americans in America. So they take a lot of those instruments that are made from bamboo or whatnot, and also create their own instruments, and add a little bit of electronics, a little bit of reverb to it, a little thing that's very tastefully done. So I've been working a lot with them. I've been featured a number of times on their concerts, where what I really like about that is because it takes something old. It takes like it's the classical music. It takes the elements of something like that, you know, the tradition, but brings it to the 21st century. We're doing contemporary things. We're writing everything. And, you know, it has this essence of something old with the heart of something new. So I'm really excited about doing more concerts with them.
That sounds great. Well, I look forward to following these and listening to them and seeing where you go with all this, and where your path takes you next after that. Isn't it fun?
It's fun. It's fun. It's not easy, but it's fun. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I really appreciate you having me on here, you know, because, you know, yeah, the cello and music it's always been my voice. And one thing I wanted to try to do, to be honest, though, I do want to inspire people. I do want them to write their own things. But to be honest, I never got into music for other people. I did it for myself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's never like the idea was like, oh, I'm going to perform for other people and make them enjoy my stuff. I could care less. Sometimes I still care less whether they enjoy it or not. It's like I'm doing this for my own sake. And it's just everybody else happens to be along for the ride. That being said, I still enjoy teaching others, because if they have that same passion, then I love to, you know, impart it to them and see where it takes them.
Right.
You know?
How much it can do for their lives as well, right?
Exactly. It's like we're doing something positive, you know, and it's not easy. It's not easy being a musician these days. I mean, I don't know if it ever was. Probably never was.
Probably.
It never was. But I don't know. It's like it's a noble profession. It's like it's what we love. It's the only thing I really care about. So you gotta do it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's been entirely my pleasure, Bryan. Thanks so much. And to all of you out there, happy practicing all week, and we'll see you this time next week. Take care.
You had me at jello, jello, you had me at jello.